Shit just got very real today, guys. If you remember me saying in my past videos that the bottom is not in on AMC, we're tracking the flat portion, the bottom's not in, our third bottom all-time low will be a new all-time low, and the range I gave was mid to high $6 range. And the approximation for the date that we'd be seeing that would be the middle of next month, the middle of December. We saw it today. And there's only one way that this makes any sense. And I'm going to go over the TA. But in my opinion, we are in the process of checking off the third bottom all-time low landmark. And we'll start with this. And this is switching up the perspective a little bit. Not really switching it up, just going back to the original flat portion that started in 2023. That we were tracking the whole time, and then the one-to-one date was on earnings. All that shit. So this is what I believe to be the case. And this is the flat portion of January 2020 until 2021, the squeeze, and the current 2023 until present day on the right. So, you know, it's all the same shit. You're dropping down here, it's choppy, you gap up, you drop down, choppy, gap up. You get these three peaks here, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and then you get this cup. And on the right is higher than the third peak right here, but it's also lower than the start of the flat portion where you drop down from. And over here is the same thing. So there's your first bottom, choppy, gap up, 1, 2, 3. Huge, very extended move here. But that after hours move in July wicked slightly higher than the third peak here, but at the same time, slightly lower than the start of the flat portion right here. Just the same way you see here. There's the start, slightly lower than that. And then dropping down to the second bottom, you have the tri-peak, and then your third bottom all-time low. Now, this was completely flat the whole time. This was also completely flat up until this point, until we fell off. And there's a reason for that, and I'm going to get to that. But this is the equivalent of the July landmark here, and then coming down here, this is your second bottom. This is the second bottom on AMC. The little cup on the side right here is right here. The second bottom, the tri-peak, and then your third bottom all-time low. The tri-peak, and then your third bottom all-time low, which we just formed today. New low today, new all-time low today. This was the move that we were looking for next month. We got it today. Does this speed things up? Tracking wise, it puts us further ahead as far as speeding us up for our squeeze. No, it's still the same. It's January, always has been. But yes, this is very drastic. It's flat to a point and then it falls off. This was just flat the whole time. Here's the reason why. And now we're looking at is zoomed out a little bit. So this is the 2020 cycle right here. From IPO, the whole downtrend, your macro resistance line, and then your January squeeze, and then the macro resistance line of the current cycle, and where we are today. So the first cup here, this little V shape right there, come down, curl up, and then drop to the flat portion, play it out. In the previous cycle, this was completely flat. And this trend line, the macro resistance line, is not the same, and I've been saying this for all my past videos, this trend line is not the same as this. AMC is not what it was right now back here. And what I mean by that is the retail interest, the amount of volume that's being pumped into the stock is way different than what we saw previously in the previous macro. Now, this flat portion played out flat the entire time. And you have that first peak here in the U pokes above the trend. And you have the exact same thing right here. That July move actually poked through the macro resistance, our halt line, the macro resistance of AMC. And then in both cycles, you fall back underneath. This one did not remain flat, but fell lower. And the reason being, and I just said it, these trend lines are not the same. There was no room to go flat here for the remainder of the flat portion, because breaking through this trend, this is the halt trend. It's a straight line. There's no daily intraday price action on the other side of this trend line. That is not a straight line. As compared to the previous cycle where it was fine. You just broke through. This is all intraday shit. This is all intraday movement here, but then you fall back through. The tri-peak even pokes through it. All intraday shit. This one poke that we have through it was an after hours gap up, and the next day we halted off of this trend. There's no all of this price action intraday on the other side of this trend. It's just straight line volatility to the upside. So with that being said, and one more thing while I'm here, and you can see it here on the bottom, the dates are here. The flat portion of the previous cycle pretty much starts right at the new year, 2020. Pretty much right there at the new year at January 2020, you start the flat portion, you play it out, and then it concludes January 2021, pretty much a year later. And then in the current cycle, it's pretty much the same thing. Starting the flat portion here, January 2023, and we're approaching our macro resistance, our halt line, January 2024. Always fucking has been. So that's important to note. We were 1-to-1 going into earnings. Earnings day, when I had the date range pulled from the beginning of the flat portion until the peak, was 1-to-1. It was 1-to-1 on earnings, which was right here approximately. At the top of this M move was earnings. It's still pretty much 1-to-1. It's about as close as you can get. Even if we get dragged out here until January, it's another, what, 30, 60 days? That's if we don't see it sooner in December. Another 30 to 60 days approximately. It's pretty much still 1-to-1. It's slightly slower in the current, which is fine because the macro as a whole in its entirety is faster, much faster. So that's that. That's going to be a relatively quick video, by the way. Here's zooming in a little bit more. So dropping down to your first bottom, chop, gap up, 3 peaks here. Dropping down to the first bottom, chop, gap up, 3 peaks here. Very extended on the U move, but you get that same wick down that you see here, this little cup that you see here into the move. It's also a gap up, just like we saw here. It also breaks the macro resistance, just like we saw here. In both cases, you don't come up as high as the start of the flat portion, but it's higher than the third peak in the yellow. And then you fall back through the macro resistance down to your second bottom, the tri-peak, and then your third bottom all-time low, which is where we are now. So nothing has changed here. This trend in white is our macro resistance, macro halt line. If we're dead flat here at our all-time low levels, we're meeting this at the very end of December, very early January, the first week of January. So last week December, first week January, we're meeting this trend, the macro halt line. There's no intraday chop, fucking barcodey bullshit price action on the other side of this trend. It's straight line volatility like we've never seen before. That's what's on the other side of this trend. On the flip side of that coin, and I've talked about this multiple times, if we do work our way back up to this trend at the end of December, early January, and we halt again off of it to the downside, that halt to the downside will be followed with momentum, and in my opinion, we will be heading towards zero. I don't think this is the case. I really can't imagine a world where we halt off of this trend to the downside and head for zero. It doesn't make sense, even from a fundamental standpoint. So that's that. Zooming in a little bit more now, and I'm just pulling a price range here. So second bottom, the bottom of that to the bottom of the third bottom is roughly a 9% move. So from this bottom to this bottom is roughly a 9% move. Running it over here, as of right now, it's roughly a 7% move. It's possible the bottom is not in. Lining it up for a 9% move like we saw previously would take us to low $6 range, 620 to 630. It's possible the bottom's not in. It really does not fucking make a difference. If we're playing out the third bottom all-time low, this is what we were looking for anyway. We were looking for this next month. We're getting it right now. I'm not going to complain about that. This is what we were looking for next month. It just happened today. New all-time low today. I'm not saying the bottom's in. It's very possible there's a little bit more downside here, but pretty much this is it. This is the final landmark of AMC, and this is the end of the road. This trend line here in white, our macro resistance, macro halt line, is the end of the road for AMC. We either break this trend. I've said it in my last video. I'll say it again. There's two scenarios. We break this trend to the upside, head for $1,400, 3.618 fib. We halt off of it to the downside, probably followed by heavy selling momentum, and head for a penny land and probably zero, which is very, very unlikely. I don't see a world where that happens. But those are the options. Those are the two scenarios: is we halt to the downside off this trend when we meet it, head for zero, or we break it, the likely scenario, and we head for the 3618 fib, $1,400. And that squeeze, if we get to that point where we break this trend to the upside, that is going to be instant. It is going to be a straight fucking line to the moon with insane volume, insane volatility, straight fucking line. There's no chop, slow climb on the other side of this line here. There's just not. We've seen it. July, perfect example. July, 100% move, 1 minute. 1 minute time, 100% move after hours, straight fucking line. Came back down, halted off the trend, and here we are today. That's that. So that's pretty much it. There's only one possible way this makes sense now, and here it is. And this is, doesn't really change much. It actually pushes us forward now, landmark-wise. We were looking for this dip here. We were looking for the tri-peak, and then we were looking for the third bottom all-time low, a new all-time low. We got it today. And the only way this makes sense is how I have this presented now, where the flat portion was right the first time. Here it is, played out here, just like we saw here, up until this point in July, which is this equivalent, and then we fell down again because there was no going sideways here because of this trend. This is our halt trend. There's no sideways price action here. We had to come down this low. And I've gone over all the reasons why. That's another one to the list. Filling all the open gaps to the downside, meeting 8 for the conversion at the penny, stop losses, shaking people out, all those reasons. Another one added to the list, our macro halt line, halt, 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 halt. Here it is. There was no going sideways for the rest of the flat portion here, is pretty much my point. So again, we are now at our third bottom all-time low. I'm not saying it's in. It's very possible there's a little bit more downside. I wouldn't be surprised at all to see more downside. But that is where we are landmark-wise, and that is it. There's no other scenario now. Legitimately, there is not a single other possible scenario now other than we are approaching this landmark right here, the all-time low, third bottom of the flat portion. That's it. That is the only other case. And it actually pushes us ahead of what I was going over in my past couple of videos. Moves us forward landmark-wise. Time frame for the squeeze, just throwing out an approximation here. January 2024 always fucking has been. I just went over it back here really quickly. I'll do it again. Flat portion of the previous cycle started in 2020, ended 2021, right at the new year. So started pretty much at the new year, ended pretty much at the new year, 1 year. The current cycle flat portion, again, started right at the new year, January 2023, and looks like we're going to be ending right at the new year, January 2024. Pretty much one-to-one. It's a little bit slower now in the current cycle, but it's still relatively as close as you can get to being one-to-one. Fractally speaking, tracking this, it's pretty much one-to-one. That's it. Possibly more downside. It's possible that the downside's done now, and we're just going to be chopping. How does this play out? Probably something like this. When the bottom's in, it's probably something choppy like this. Choppy sideways and then in an upward direction, meeting this trend somewhere late December, early January. That's it. That's it. There's nothing else to say. Another date, if we want to start talking about dates here, we meet this trend the last week of December, first week of January, the halt trend. This halt trend meets zero the end of January 2024. I believe it's like January 25th or 28th. This trend hits $0. This is our halt trend. Hits $0 late January 2024. That's it. As far as SPY goes, did get some more upside. I went over 2 cases in my last video. Potentially the top was in. Potentially this was the double top we were looking for, expecting a pullback. There was also another scenario where we climbed a little bit higher to 455 to 458. Climbed up to 455, pulling back now. Still, this is the landmark that we're seeing right here. I've covered this multiple times. The 409, the 409, the climb to 450, the climb to 450. Landmark wise for SPY, once this top is done here, pulling back one more time and then climbing to all-time highs. Still, I'm looking for a double top here. However long this takes, might take the rest of this week into next week, I don't know. But looking for a double top here at 455 and then a pullback. Do we pull back all the way to 420? I'm not too sure, just because of this macro trend right here. The descending broadening wedge that we had here on the micro, meeting this trend somewhere high 430 range. And I also went over the scenario where we would meet that, find a small bounce, and then fall through it potentially to check off the 420. And then we would see all-time highs. And again, this is also lining up for January 2024. Just like AMC, S&P 500, previous all-time highs was January 2022, right here. And it looks like, once again, it's lining up for new all-time highs, January 2024, right at the new year, just like AMC. Maybe there's something to that, maybe there's not, I don't know, maybe it's coincidence, I'm not sure. But both S&P 500 and AMC are lining up for all-time highs, January 2024. I think that's it for the video. I'm sure a lot of people are bugging the fuck out today. We were looking for this. I said it in my last video. Eventually, we're going to be looking for this third bottom. It will be a new all-time low. It's going to bring us to the $6 range, mid to high $6 range. Here we are today, and this is the only way it makes sense. And one more time, the macro resistance of our current cycle, the trend that we've halted off every time we've touched it, is meeting us right at the end of December, right at early January. We're meeting that trend once again. And the options, we break it to the upside, head to 1400, 3618 fib. We halt off of it again to the downside, followed by heavy selling pressure. And more than likely, in that scenario, we'd be heading for zero. That's it. And this trend is meeting zero at the end of January 2024. That is it for the video. Potentially, there's more downside on the table for tomorrow for AMC. Potentially, today, the bottom is in. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Unless you're playing weeklies, which if you are, I don't know why you are. We're just going to be chopping down here until we're not, and we still have another month and a half. That's it. That's it for the video. Was there anything else? No, that's it. So that's it for today. I'm not sure if I'm going to be uploading again tomorrow, but I will be making another update video this week. If not tomorrow, then more than likely it would be Friday to give a weekly recap once again. And that is it. I'll catch you guys in the next video.